The galaxy was quiet the day it arrived. In the core of neutral space, near the edges of the Concord's influence, a ripple tore through subspace without warning. Smooth, silent, and unnatural. No flare of thrusters, no signature warp gate. Just a distortion, as if space itself had been peeled open. A ship appeared unlike anything recorded in galactic archives. Over 3 kilometers long, dark and sharp like a spear forged from night. It bore no markings, no flag, no transmission codes. It simply hung there, motionless, a void against the stars. Station Omega 9, a diplomatic hub orbiting the moon of Varel, was the first to see it. Automated systems flagged it as an unknown artifact. Sensors failed to read its hull composition, which shifted and pulsed slightly, as if alive. Then came the silence, deafening in a galaxy used to chatter, diplomacy, and data flow. No. Hails were returned. No scans allowed in. The Concord's High Command responded swiftly, dispatching a patrol fleet to investigate. The ships, sleek and bright, formed a cautious formation near the anomaly. Captain Seren of the Valari was chosen to initiate contact. His voice, translated across dozens of frequencies, echoed, "Unknown vessel, identify yourself. This is neutral space under Concord protection. State your purpose." There was no reply. Only a low-frequency hum, like a storm far away, pulsed from the black ship. Suddenly, a transmission broke through, a voice, clear and cold, speaking a language long thought extinct. "You forgot we were out here. We didn't." The crew of Omega 9 froze. The translation engine struggled but finally settled on one word for the ship's origin. Terran. The name sent ripples through Concord records. Terrans, humans, were myths. A race once said to be reckless, brilliant, and unbreakable, destroyed 3 centuries ago in the final war of the Coalition cleansing. Their worlds were wiped out, their fleets dismantled, their people scattered or lost. But this ship didn't look like debris. It looked new, angry, alive. The patrol fleet made the mistake of moving closer. 3 scout ships advanced in peace. Shields lowered. Then the space around them folded, not exploded, folded, like paper crumpled in a child's hand. The 3 ships vanished, not destroyed, but gone. No wreckage, no signal. Only the hum remained, rising now, vibrating through Omega 9's walls like a distant drumbeat. Panic rose in the command center. Who were these Terrans? Why return now? A diplomatic broadcast was sent out across the sector, calling for emergency talks. But in the data logs of Omega 9, someone found a phrase buried in a failed transmission, a line the black ship had sent in a primitive human dialect: "We are the last memory of Earth, and we do not forgive." Meanwhile, deep inside the Terran vessel, TSV Revenant, Admiral Kira Voss stood before a holographic map of the sector. Her eyes were steady, her face lined with age and silence. Around her, the command deck was calm. Officers, some human, others cybernetically enhanced, worked without emotion. No one spoke unless required. They had trained for this moment in darkness, built their future from the ashes of forgotten moons and dead stars. Kira tapped the side of her console. A picture appeared, faded, torn, showing Earth in her prime. Lush, blue, and alive. She whispered, "They'll remember us now." Behind her, the ship's AI, codename Nightingale, pulsed to life. "Admiral, Concord forces are mobilizing. Multiple fleets en route. Estimated time to contact, 3 standard cycles." Kira didn't blink. Let them come. She walked to the viewing bay. From there, she could see the Concord station, small, shimmering like a jewel beneath the shadow of the Revenant. "Record this," she said. Nightingale complied. The G. Admiral spoke slowly, clearly, with the weight of 100 years buried behind each word. "We do not seek war. We seek memory. We seek justice. Those who participated in our end will answer. Those who stood by will remember. And those who resist will vanish." The message was sent across every Concord frequency. Panic turned to fear. Every diplomat, Every historian, every commander scrambled to understand what was happening, and as more ships arrived, staying at a fearful distance, none dared to fire. Because something in the way that Terran ship moved, without engines, without sound, like a predator, told them that firing first would be the last thing they ever did. And so the Revenant waited, silent, watching, unblinking. The galaxy held its breath. And in the far-off ruins of forgotten battles, old Terran beacons began to blink, one by one, awakened by the return of their own. The silence after the Terran message echoed longer than anyone expected, stretching across command centers, news, channels, and private bunkers, like a shadow that wouldn't leave. On Valari Prime, inside the tall glass tower of the conquered High Command, Fleet Marshal Terran stood alone in her war chamber, staring at an ancient file that hadn't been opened in over 300 years. The name was simple: Sul Archive. Its contents were sealed to most, forgotten by many, but not by her. She had lived through the last days of the cleansing war, though few knew it. Her memories of humans were not from stories, but from fire. Cities burning, war machines screaming through the skies, and human voices crying out not in fear, but in rage. They had been clever, chaotic, and fiercely united at the end. The Coalition believed humanity had been erased, its fleets turned to ash and its worlds sterilized. But Terran had always doubted it. There had been whispers after the war, signals, from the deep sightings of unmapped objects on the edge of black hole systems. And now those whispers stood in orbit above a conquered moon. The TSV Revenant, a ghost from the past. Terrans, not dead but changed. She opened the file and studied the images, photos of Earth before it fell. Green forests, bright cities, people smiling under real sun. She saw the face of a human diplomat, young and proud, who had spoken the final words of peace before his ship was destroyed by the Coalition. "We were never the monsters," he had said. "We were just tired of being prey." She remembered how those words made her pause, even during the war. Now they returned with a sharp edge. A meeting of Concord leaders was called, each species sending their top voices, all talking over each other, none offering solutions. The Uller demanded a show of force. The Garyun wanted peace talks. The Delrex suggested surrender before it was too late. But no one could agree, and all were afraid to say what they truly feared, that they had wronged a species that had never truly been defeated. Outside the meeting, rumors spread. Pirates in the outer sectors began switching allegiance, declaring loyalty to the lost sons of Earth. Old rebel groups started using Terran signals. And strangest of all, deep space sensors picked up ancient Earth-era satellites activating, blinking slowly as if waiting for a command. Back aboard the Revenant, Admiral Kira Voss watched it all, unfold on a tactical screen filled with red and green dots. Nightingale, the ship's AI, read out the data in a calm voice. "Valari Prime has mobilized a second fleet. Concord continues to delay direct contact. Threat level, unchanged." Kira didn't smile. She didn't need to. Everything was going as she had expected. "They still don't understand," she said softly. "They think we want war, but we want them to remember every planet they took from us, every lie they wrote in their archives." She walked through the long steel corridor of the command deck, passing armored officers and silent drone crew. Each one of them was a survivor, or the child of one. Raised in exile, trained in secret stations, orbiting dying stars, educated by machines built from Earth's final fragments. In her private quarters, Kira opened a metal case no one else had ever touched. Inside was a piece of scorched stone, no larger than her palm, etched with the image of a tree, Earth's symbol of life. It had been taken from the ruins of old Tokyo during the last Terran evacuation. She ran her thumb across it. "We were born from Sol," she whispered, "and we carry its fire still." On the other side of the galaxy, strange things began to happen. A conquered listening post near the Raxil Nebula went silent. Patrol ships found only floating wreckage and a symbol carved into the hull, 3 stars and a triangle, the mark of Earth's last resistance fleet. Old stations built by humans, once thought destroyed, started transmitting low-band signals in ancient Terran code. Concord scientists were baffled. The messages were coordinates, no threats, no words, just numbers, and each one pointed to places where humans had once lived and died. As these signals spread, civilian planets began to panic. Colonies with hidden human ancestry feared being found. Children asked questions about Earth no one wanted to answer. In quiet corners, old songs from Sol were played again, melodies, filled with sorrow and steel. In the council, Terran finally spoke the truth aloud. They're not here to conquer us. They're here to make sure we remember what we did. Her voice stopped the room. No one denied it. For the first time in centuries, the conquered felt small. The fear was no longer about battle. It was about history and justice. Meanwhile, in the Revenant's inner core, Nightingale finished sinking with a deep vault buried inside the ship. Its systems blinked green, unlocking one memory archive after another. Logs from the last days of Earth, videos of cities crumbling under enemy fire, recordings of humans refusing to flee without each other. The AI whispered these memories through, the ship's walls like lullabies from a forgotten past. Every officer on board felt it. They weren't just soldiers, they were the last storytellers of a world stolen too soon. In the medbay, a young ensign named Roe stared at a hologram of Earth's sky, playing on loop. He had never seen a real sky, only steel ceilings and simulated starlight. But he had sworn the oath of Sol, just like all Revenant crew. To remember, to rise, to never kneel again. Outside, in orbit above Varel's moon, the stars seemed to bend around the ship, reacting to systems no conquered species could explain. The Revenant wasn't just a ship. It was a memory given form, a lesson given teeth. And far across space, in deep vaults the galaxy had long forgotten, ancient Terran constructs began to stir, giant machines that had slept through time, waiting for the signal. The one that now pulsed from the Revenant like a heartbeat returning to a lost body. The Concord had always believed that time would erase the crimes of war. But time, they were learning, was exactly what humans had used to become something else. Something that remembered everything. The spark began with fear, but it was fear wrapped in pride. The Uller Dominion, known across the stars for its fast ships and colder hearts, decided the waiting had gone on too long. To them, the Terran Battleship orbiting Varel's moon was not a warning. It was a challenge. Their leaders, cloaked in gold and arrogance, claimed it was time to remind the galaxy who truly held power. Without asking the Concord's permission, the Uller launched a strike force of 8 warships toward the TSV Revenant, declaring it a hostile artifact. The news spread like wildfire. Across conquered systems, eyes turned toward the ship that had not yet fired a single shot. Inside the Revenant, the crew watched the incoming Uller vessels with steady silence. Admiral Kira Voss stood at the center of the bridge, arms crossed behind her back, face unmoving. The lights of the threat warning systems pulsed red, but no, one flinched. Nightingale's voice, smooth and emotionless, filled the air. Incoming Armada. Threat classification, level 3. Recommend activation of defense protocols. Kira's answer was simple. Only defend, do not strike first. The Uller fleet reached the edge of the ship's defensive radius and opened fire without hesitation. Energy lances, plasma bolts, and gravity missiles filled the void like a rain of stars, but none of them hit. Before the weapons could reach the Revenant, space itself shimmered. The ship's defensive systems bent the fabric of reality around it, folding the trajectories like paper curves. Missiles curved away, plasma vanished into ripples. The Uller ships paused, confused, sensors spinning. Then came the response, not from the Terran ship's weapons, but from a new shape rising from beneath its hull. A swarm of dark drones poured out like ink and water, small and silent, gliding through the battlefield. They didn't fire. They didn't speak. They attached themselves to each enemy ship like insects to a corpse. Seconds later, the Uller fleet powered down. Not destroyed, disabled, floating helpless. Every system locked. Communications jammed. Weapons cold. One by one, the other ships sent distress calls to Concord Command, begging for assistance. It was the first real proof that the Terrans could have destroyed them, and didn't. The message was clear: we can end you, but we choose not to, yet. The galaxy trembled. On distant worlds, protests broke out. Some citizens demanded peace with the Terrans. Others blamed the Uller for provoking them. Still others began raising Terran flags, symbols of Sol's ancient glory now returning from legend into living memory. The Concord Council met again, but now fear had become division. Some leaders called for immediate surrender. Others insisted on full mobilization. Fleet Marshal Terran watched it all quietly, knowing the spark had been lit. War had not started, but the match had been thrown into dry grass. And as systems took sides, the balance began to tip. Civil unrest grew in colonies where human blood still ran through mixed families. Old rebel cells, once broken, began rearming. Messages from hidden Terran allies, deep cover agents thought extinct, flooded communication networks with promises of protection and revenge. And through it all, the Revenant remained silent, watching. But it was not idle. Inside the ship, deep in its lower decks, Nightingale began activating Protocol Iron Path, a sequence stored for centuries, a path mapped through space, connecting forgotten ruins of Terran outposts, dead planets and battlegrounds where their people had once fought and fallen. Kira studied the path in silence, remembering the training passed down since she was a child. Each stop was a story. Each world was a scar. Now they would visit them again, not to grieve, but to awaken what lay buried. The first destination was Sigma 5, a mining colony long lost in the archives of time, wiped from maps after the Cleansing War. As the Revenant prepared to jump, conquered fleets moved to block its path, hoping to contain the situation. But none dared fire. Not after what happened to the Uller. The Terran Battleship simply vanished in a blink, its jump drive bending the laws of space in a way no conquered vessel understood. At Sigma 5, the ship arrived to find only dust and broken rock. But beneath the surface, something waited. Using ancient codes, Nightingale opened sealed vaults hidden underground. What they found was not weapons, but memory. Project Eidolon, half-built warforms, experimental tech, and data cores filled with the knowledge of old Earth scientists who had died trying to protect their future. As the crew recovered what they could, Kira felt the spark grow into something more. Not just a symbol, a movement, a rising. Concord scouts followed, but stayed far away. They watched helplessly as the Terrans moved from ruin to ruin, reclaiming pieces of themselves, growing stronger in the shadows. And all the while, small groups across the stars began rising up. Civilians broadcast messages of loyalty to Sol. Pirate clans offered their fleets in exchange for safety. Former soldiers, once forced to betray humans in the war, turned themselves in, asking only for a chance to atone. The spark had become a storm, and the galaxy had no plan to stop it. Conquered leaders called it sedition, terror, madness, but the people called it something else: the return. And in quiet corners of the stars, ancient Terran codes blinked alive for the first time in centuries, one after another, waiting for the signal only the Revenant could send. Beneath the blackened skies of Delta Serpentis 4, a planet long abandoned. After the Cleansing War, the TSV Revenant hovered in silence, cloaked in the dim light of a dying red sun. The ground below was cracked and dry, covered in ash and twisted metal bones of old Terran bunkers, once proud, now forgotten by all but those who carried the memory. Admiral Kira Voss stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the ghostly surface of the world that once held one of Earth's final defenses. This place had not been listed on any conquered star map for centuries, its name erased, its purpose buried. But Terrans never forgot. Inside the command deck, Nightingale spoke in a low voice. "We have confirmed the signal. Vault 17 lies intact beneath Sector C. Power readings are low but present. Security systems appear dormant. Recommendation: proceed with caution." Kira nodded once. Deploy recovery team. No weapons unless fired upon. She turned and walked to the window, watching as 4 dark landing pods dropped from the Revenant, cutting clean lines through the heavy red air. On board those pods were some of the best-trained soldiers the lost human colonies had ever produced. Silent, swift, and bound by the oath of Saul. As the pods landed, the soldiers stepped into a dead world, where nothing moved but wind and the sound of dry sand scraping across metal. The surface was quiet, but underground, something still lived. They found Vault 17 beneath a shattered Terran flag, its faded colors burned into the steel above a blast door sealed tight by time. It took them 2 hours to breach the outer locks, bypassing traps designed to kill invaders. But they weren't invaders. They were descendants. Inside, they found rows of data cores, frozen labs, and one final room, sealed with an old symbol of Earth's Defense Corps, a circle with a single star at its heart. The door opened slowly, creaking like a tomb. Inside, they found the forgotten weapon. At first, it looked like a broken machine, just a tall metallic frame with no power, no movement. But as the team approached, lights blinked awake across its surface, reading their DNA, scanning for command codes. Nightingale's voice came through their comms. Identification confirmed. Project Aegis 9 is still operational, activating now. The soldiers stepped back as the machine rose to life. Its core pulsed with an eerie blue glow, and its limbs unfolded with quiet precision. It was not a robot. It was not an AI. It was something else. A weapon born from human desperation and genius, left behind when Earth fell, too powerful and dangerous to use without reason. It had no name in conquered history, but Terrans knew what it was, Earth's last guardian. It had been built to end wars, not start them, but now it would serve again. The soldiers returned it to the Revenant, and as it entered the ship, systems across the vessel shifted, new codes unlocked, hidden blueprints appeared, and a voice long dormant echoed through the bridge. Unit Aegis 9 online, awaiting mission. Kira stood before it, smaller in size but equal in presence. You were built to protect us, she said. Now help us remind the galaxy why we were feared. Meanwhile, the Conquered Council erupted, in panic as news reached them. Aegis 9 had been a rumor among old war veterans, a ghost story about a weapon that could think like a man, adapt like a machine, and survive anything. They had believed it was destroyed. Now it was active. Concord. Forces scrambled to act. Fleet Marshal Terran ordered a fleet to intercept the Revenant before it reached the next system, an old rebel world called Harkon's Reach, where Terran loyalists were rumored to be gathering. The trap was set. 50 warships formed a blockade, ready to stop the ship by force. But when the Revenant arrived, it did not come alone. It emerged from subspace with the forgotten weapon standing on its forward deck, Aegis 9 exposed to open space, pulsing with energy. The moment the blockade scanned it, fear gripped every pilot. The weapon didn't move. It simply stood, watching. Then it vanished. In a flash of light, it jumped across space, appearing behind the enemy flagship without warning. No propulsion, no trace, just instant presence. Before anyone could react, every Concord ship lost contact with its weapon systems. Shields failed. Engines stalled. No damage was done, but the message was clear. You cannot stop what remembers how to win. The Revenant passed through the blockade unharmed, and behind it, the Terran flag reappeared across rebel networks. The weapon was not forgotten anymore. It was the spark turned to flame. Across the stars, those who still carried Earth's blood began to rise, some in secret, some in force. On remote mining colonies, human engineers began building replicas of Aegis 9, using stolen plans hidden deep within the Revenant's new databanks. On frontier worlds, Terran militias formed, wearing the old Earth emblems like armor. Even within the Conquered, voices began to question everything. Some officers resigned rather than fight the Terrans, some leaked intelligence, and a few defected entirely. The balance of power, once firmly held by the conquered, began to shift, all because of a single weapon no one believed could return. But Terrans knew better. They had built it not just to fight, but to be remembered. And now, the galaxy had no choice but to remember with them. The stars above Eleron Prime were cold and silent as the Concord Council met for what they called an emergency session. Though everyone knew it was not a meeting, it was a reckoning. Word of the forgotten weapon had spread like fire across every sector. Aegis 9, once a name hidden in myth, was now real and active, having walked through a fleet blockade without lifting a weapon. Entire Concord colonies were trembling, their leaders unsure if they would be protected or judged next. Protests had turned violent on over a dozen worlds. Half the Outer Rim had declared independence and swore loyalty to the Terran cause. And now, as the Grand Chamber filled with voices from every species, there was no longer unity in their tone, only fear and blame. At the heart of it all stood Fleet Marshal Terran, older than most, but still commanding respect. She had fought. The Terrans once had believed them gone. But now she knew better. They had not returned as conquerors. They had returned as memory sharpened into blade. Terran raised her voice over the noise and demanded silence. She showed the council the intercepted footage from Harkon's Reach, where the TSV Revenant had landed and raised the old Terran flag. The people of the planet had gathered around it in silence, kneeling not in surrender, but in unity. There were no speeches, no threats, only a message transmitted across all channels. We remember Earth. We remember justice. The room froze. When Kira Voss appeared on the screen, standing with Aegis 9 at her side, she said only one sentence. We are not here for war. We are here for judgment. That was when the debate truly broke. Some conquered leaders demanded full-scale retaliation, fearing what would happen if they did nothing. Others argued for peace, for opening dialogue, for admitting the truth of the past. But no one could deny it any longer. The Terrans had not forgotten the cleansing war. They had not forgiven the attempt to erase their kind. And now they held the power to expose everything. In secret chambers beneath the council, old files were accessed. Archives long buried that proved what many had feared. Earth had not been a threat. It had been framed. The cleansing war was not about survival. It had been about power. The Concord's founding species had feared what humans might become. Their creativity, their will, their refusal to bow. So they had turned on Earth, burned its cities, hunted its people, lied to their own. Terran stared at those files and felt the weight of it crush her chest. She had fought thinking it was justice. It had been genocide. Meanwhile, above Eleron Prime, the Revenant arrived. It did not hide. It did not fire. It simply took orbit, and from its hull, a beam of light shone downward, activating a transmission that reached every world. The voice of Nightingale echoed, across all frequencies, calm and terrible. To the Conquered Council, the time for silence is over. You will speak truth. You will face judgment. Then a countdown appeared, one standard cycle. 24 hours. No threats followed, no demands. Just time to confess or deny. Panic swept through conquered space. Some systems severed ties with the Council immediately. Others begged the Terrans for peace. A few rogue admirals tried to organize fleets, but no one would follow. Not after Harkon. Not after the blockade. And as the countdown ticked lower, the real fear spread, not of death, but of history. People began to ask questions long buried. Who had fired the first shot at Earth? Who ordered the cleansing of Sul? Who profited from the lie? On 1,000 worlds, statues of Concord heroes were torn down. Old Terran books were read in secret. Children asked what the stars used to look like from Earth's skies. And in her private chamber, Terran made her decision. When the last hour came, she walked alone into the council chamber and activated the holofeed to the Revenant. Kira appeared, still calm, still silent. Aegis 9 stood behind her, watching with its glowing eyes. Terran took a breath and began to speak, not with excuses, not with orders, but with truth. She confessed to the lies, to the war, to the erasure of Earth. She did not beg forgiveness. She did not expect mercy. She only spoke what needed to be said. Across the galaxy, her words were heard. And when she finished, Kira spoke one final sentence. Judgment is not vengeance. It is remembrance. Then the feed ended. The countdown reached 0. But nothing exploded. No fleets moved. The Revenant remained in orbit, still and waiting. And the galaxy realized what the Terrans had truly come for. Not war, not conquest, but truth. To awaken a memory so long buried that it had become myth. And now that it had returned, nothing would ever be the same. Judgment had come, and the galaxy would have to live with what it remembered. The stars over Seoul burned brighter than they had in centuries, and for the first time in living memory, Earth's skies were no longer empty. Above the blue planet, the TSV Revenant floated like a silent guardian, casting its long shadow across oceans that once ran red during the Cleansing War, while below broken cities had begun to stir with light again. The world that had been forgotten now stood as the beating heart of something new, not yet fully born but already moving, breathing, growing in the cracks left by fear and guilt. Across the galaxy, change had spread like morning mist, quiet but unstoppable. After Admiral Kira Voss gave Concord the chance to confess, and Fleet Marshal Terran had done so with her head high and voice steady, everything shifted, not because of threats or force, but because truth had a gravity of its own, pulling at conscience and memory. Entire sectors declared independence from the Concord, not out of rebellion, but to stand with Sol. Ancient Terran outposts once buried or destroyed were reclaimed by former enemies now seeking peace. Even species who once joined the war against Earth now sent messages of regret, offering aid or at least the hope of forgiveness. But it was not easy. On worlds where the lies had lasted longest, protests turned into riots as people refused to believe the truth, clinging to old fears, blaming Earth again for the chaos. On other planets, Terran symbols were raised too quickly, and retaliation followed from those who still feared what humans might become. The galaxy stood on the edge of collapse or unity, and no one could tell which way it would fall. That was when Kira made her most dangerous move, not through ships or weapons, but with words. She called for a meeting, not a war council, not a surrender, a summit, one that would take place on Earth itself. She invited every species, every system, every leader willing to listen. Many refused. Some threatened to attack, but others came. Some out of guilt, some out of curiosity, and a few because they saw something they had never seen before, a chance to fix what had been broken for so long. The first to arrive were the Jital, once Earth's closest allies before the cleansing. Their emissaries touched down in Old Berlin, now a city slowly being rebuilt by survivors and descendants. The Zexari came next, their tall crystalline bodies reflecting the sun as they walked the ruins of old towers in silence, remembering the terror they had once helped cause. Even a small Uller delegation came, quiet and cold, but present. And when Fleet Marshal Terran stepped onto Earth soil again, she did so without armor or escort, only with a datapad containing every file of the Cleansing War, now declassified and available for the galaxy to see. In what was once Geneva, the summit began. Not in grand halls, but in a reclaimed bunker with simple chairs and tables, surrounded by Terran guards and Nightingale's silent watch from orbit. Kira stood before them, not as a conqueror, but as a reminder. Her words were clear, spoken without anger. You erased our name. You hunted our people. But we are still here. And we offer peace not because we are weak, but because we know what war becomes. There was silence after she finished, long and heavy. Then Terran stood and placed the datapad on the table. We cannot undo what was done, she said, voice rough, but we can make sure it never happens again. That was the moment the idea of a new accord was born. It was not easy. There were arguments, accusations. Old pain rose like smoke from burning ground. Some delegates stormed out, but others stayed. They listened. They asked questions. And slowly the lines began to change. No longer Terran versus conquered. Now it was those who believed in the future versus those trapped in the past. Over days that stretched into weeks, a framework was built, not around control, but cooperation. The new accord would not be a replacement for Concord, but something stronger, a council where each species held equal voice, including humans. No longer silent, no longer hunted. And more than that, the new accord would preserve memory. A record of truth kept by all, so no lie could ever again erase an entire world. When the accord was finally signed, it was done not with ceremony, but with unity. Kira, Terran, and leaders from 12 species stood beneath the old Earth flag, not the flag of a nation, but of a people, and placed their hands on the same panel, activating a beacon that sent the accord to every known system. Across the galaxy, some wept, some cheered, and some plotted still. But the line had been drawn. The war was not over, but the future had begun. In the orbit above Earth, Aegis 9 stood in silence on the hull of the Revenant, no longer a forgotten weapon, but a symbol, a reminder, and in its core, a new directive burned: protect not just humans, but peace itself. Kira watched the stars from her bridge, knowing enemies remained. Fear would never vanish completely. But now they had something stronger than fear. They had truth. They had unity. They had Sul. The nightmare had ended, and in its place, something new had opened its eyes: hope shaped by fire, memory held by steel, and a promise that Earth would never be forgotten again.